Hey guys, welcome back to the Outriders Podcast, official podcast of digital and creative media works, where each week we take something from pop culture and try to break it down to better understand it. My name is David.
My name is Ben.
And Benjamin. It's a new month, it's a new me, it's a new you. We're here.
It is a new month?
Yeah, it's a new month, man. It's April, baby.
Oh yeah, it's been April for like a week.
It's
been April for a long time.
It's been April for arguably 11 days. It's the 11th of April.
What?
Yeah.
How's it the first?
Because we recorded that before when we normally record.
Then we uploaded
away.
It on like.
And then I uploaded it after the end of April.
Well, that's a you problem.
Because I did a scheduling crime. We had some time travel on our podcast. When it went out on Thursday, but that wasn't when we recorded it, folks.
No, we recorded it on
Wednesday.
What, Wednesday?
Yeah, the previous week. It doesn't matter. There's a week buffer. It doesn't matter. People that see this live get it pretty early. It's not important. Same with Patreons. So this week and this month, I was like, you know what? It's a big month. We've got Infinity War coming up. We've got all kinds of things.
God,
not Infinity War, Endgame, excuse me. We've got all kinds of big things we're going to be talking about, and we've got a new guest coming up for next week's episode, which is exciting.
Does that mean I don't have to be here?
No, you'll be here.
Oh, God,
it's a calling guest. You love it. Don't you pretend otherwise. Ben loves this podcast, and he would rather be doing literally nothing else except be here, doing more work after work.
I could be home right now.
Lounging, chilling, relaxing, maxing all cool.
Instead, I'm sitting here about to talk about some bloody
Welcome to my
game.
fucking life, mate. So we thought, you know what? There's all kinds of things. We're going to be talking about a lot of legacies. So that's my vague theme for this month. We're going to be
vague connective tissue.
So, given that we talked about Sekiro a few weeks ago and Dark Souls has been heavy on our brains, we thought what better way than to discuss a game that's been around for a while, but kind of was pretty popular at the time because there wasn't really anything of the Souls genre out at the time. So we thought, what better way to kick off this month and talk about the legacy of Ashen.
Oh man, get ready for an episode where I just know nothing.
I can kind of look. You've played.
I've played a good 20 minutes.
You understand, like, if you played the start of it, you understand the basics of the game.
Right.
There's not much more complexity to it. If you played, there is one mechanic that I'll touch on, which is kind of crucial to understanding the way that the game functions, the way the story functions. But what I will say about this game in general is obviously it's an action role-playing game made by the New Zealand studio A44, set in a sunless world and the grueling strange land where everything seems to erode over time.
The Kiwi boys.
There's this weird thing that happened with the games journalism around this game where no one was talking about Dark Souls. Like, the game came out and everyone was like, oh, it's like a DayZ survival type thing. And I was like, it's not.
What?
Because it's from New Zealand and DayZ's from New Zealand.
What?
Isn't it? Rocket's from New
Zealand? But what? It was very clearly
a Dark
Souls thing.
Yeah, but they were like, a lot of the press was like, it's got survival elements from DayZ, and then they were like referencing other New Zealand games to prove they could. It was.
They were like DayZ and Bath of McNeill. Yeah.
Bath, exactly. But like, it was very weird. So like, I don't know what happened with games journalism when this came out, but everyone kind of lost their minds a little bit, and just forgot how to talk about games. And
at least they weren't. I mean, to be fair, anything's got to be better than like, it's like Dark Souls.
Then compare it to Dark Souls. Yeah. Exactly. Which
surely that's an upgrade.
One of the things that we'll touch on toward the end of this episode, I suppose, is that there is a definite problem with games journalism and just games discussion in general, particularly games writing, where it's like,
welcome to
there is such there is such a need. Like, I think that we need to develop better language around what makes games what they are, because Souls-like is not an adequate descriptor for a video game genre.
But I mean, that kind of terminology has been around since forever. We had before first-person shooter as a term became a thing. Everything was a Doom clone.
Right.
You had your Doom clones, and before a while they were like, "Oh, we should probably call it something else."
Right, and then like you had like Diablo style like dungeon crawls and stuff like that. And loot and slash and stuff.
Shootings.
We'll get through the summary to give you an idea of like the way the game plays out, and then we can kind of pick through what I wanted to talk about. Honestly, normally when we do these, the way that I approach the structure of the research I do is that I have a bunch of questions that the thing we consume presents, and then I try and answer them through research or through some background kind of digging up and trying to work out like, okay, what were they thinking? And that usually forms the way that I pick my topics. I mostly have questions.
And I mostly don't have the answers.
Well, I think between your game's knowledge and then my understanding of storytelling,
and you having actually played the game,
yeah, and that like hopefully between us we can get something out of it, because it's a bit like the Matrix Revolutions, right? It's a really interesting Matrix Revolutions, the third Matrix. Like
the what? There's a third Matrix movie?
I hate that you do this. They're quite good. It's one of those things that is a complex piece of art that when you watch it doesn't make any sense, and it maybe doesn't actually, but it has such potential to that I'm so curious, right?
Right. But like there's only one Matrix movie. Just so
Look.
we're clear. Yeah.
Go back and watch the other two as a grown up. I think you'll change your
The
mind.
other two? There's only one of them, dude.
Next,
1999.
what I would love is if you had a character on the show, it was the man that doesn't know what Matrix is at all. You're like, I don't know what Matrix is.
What's the Matrix?
Are we in the Matrix?
What's Dark Souls?
Okay. You play as a nameless wanderer, traveling the sunless land in search of home. At its core, Ashen is a survival exploration game where you take the tools you have and forge your way through the world, battling the strange remnants of a world that's been scorched and building a home at Vagrant's Rest. As the game goes on, you strike out from Vagrant's Rest further, defeating greater and greater foes until you traverse reality itself, confronting the void that lies at the heart of this world. Along the way, you'll investigate murder mysteries, assist grieving brothers in discovering answers about their family, and uncovering quiet, complex narratives about what's occurred in this world before the ash finally fell. Eventually, after your lengthy journey, you'll confront Cisna, the Heart of Darkness. It's kind of it. The game is very
That's it. Video game over.
yeah, at its core, I think on the surface level too, there's a lot of things where you could look at this and go, okay, well, there's not much going on here.
Right.
Like, it just looks like a kind of vanilla-y, cool, aesthetically, visually, it's like this cool washed out kind of cel-shaded watercolor style.
Low poly. kind of
It looks like
thing.
Absolver.
Yeah.
Very
when
much.
I saw it, I was like, oh, it's an Absolver sequel where they actually gave you swords.
It's not the same studio, which is really weird.
Yeah.
I'll run you through some of my questions that I don't really have answers to, and
We'll see what happens.
Well, we might return to them at the end. I just want to plant them in your head at the moment to
Alright.
see if we can get some stuff happening. So the world is this place where there's like no actual sun, and the only light comes from these like great eruptions of ash that you don't see. They're kind of off-screen things happening. What does that have to do with the story? Like, it never really connects to the darkness or like Cisna or anything like that. Why are there these weird dragon things in the world? Why do they help you? They're the fast travel mechanic because you get on a dragon and they fly you to the bonfire. What's their role in the story? Do they matter? We never really find out. And getting to the core of this kind of the shadowy kind of void creatures that sometimes inhabit the world and like the dark places in the world. Especially like the light and the dark play a big pivotal role in the story. One of the key mechanics of the game is the lantern that you have that the game does a good job of like using darkness as an actual like environmental hazard. So you need to have this lantern out, which means you can't block when you have it out. And it doesn't give you great light. It's like a real lantern in real life. Real lanterns, like you can't see through the corner pieces.
Right.
So it only gives you like around, and you can gradually upgrade
just a
it.
bit shit.
But it's still not great.
Yeah.
And you could put it down, but if you forget to pick it up, you have to go buy a new one. Or it's like a really cool like little mechanic. But and that forms a big part of the story. But like, what does that have to do with the rest of the narrative, and what does that have to do with the shadowy creatures? Like, I don't know. Like, it never kind of goes anywhere with it. And whenever the game, like, why are the lamps an important element? Why is Vagrant's Rest safe? Is it because it's well lit? Why isn't that a main mechanic? My big thesis about the game ultimately is going to be about the fact that you play as an NPC, but we'll get to that because there's a cool like little twist this game has that fucking blew my mind. I want to talk about the town because one of the big differentiators between this game and like a Dark Souls or like an Absolver game like that, other roguelike games that have similar mechanics.
Roguelike? Sorry, what?
Is that what the word is? Or like corpse run? I don't know what the word is.
I mean, I guess roguelike, but just that mechanic of dying and respawning.
They call it corpse run in the From Software discourse, where it's like
corpse
running is the mechanic where you die and you have to go back to where you died to keep progressing.
That's a fair name. Yeah.
And you have save points along the way that let you go. That mean you have to go back less far.
Yeah.
Which I think is like an apt turn of phrase.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's better than roguelike. Roguelike
it
kind of
doesn't
implies a hard reset.
Right.
Upon death.
Although, like, Moonlighter is a similar roguelike where it's a hard reset upon death, but you're still building a town outside of that.
Well, that's like roguelike elements, where you sort of have, like, progression beyond the roguelike.
But you still have the roguelike element.
You still have the idea of, like, running, doing a run.
Well, I guess for me, then, the most unique thing about this game versus, like, something like the Souls franchise or, like, the other kind of similar games we've seen in the time since is that unlike a lot of these games... you actually get to see your efforts change the world. It is a lot like Moonlighter. My plan is to talk to Aaron about it in a part 2, but there are so many elements in this game that very much remind me of Moonlighter. Because as you get through the game and you kill more bosses and stuff, the town like starts to be rebuilt around you.
Right.
So like, when you kill the first boss, a few more people move in. You kill the next boss, and it's not like Bloodborne where just more people join. You kill the next boss and they put up scaffolding. And you kill the next boss,
Like, what?
and they started to fill in the scaffolding, and then there's like a new campfire, and then there's a campfire, and then they keep building around it, and eventually the campfire, they put boarding and stuff down, and it becomes a hearth and an oven, and then there's like a person's house, and as you go through the game, like I was expecting it to be kind of like, oh, there's 3 things. There are so many different people that keep coming in, new additions and stuff. It's fucking fascinating.
Right.
And it, the ultimately what starts to happen is the more you get into the game, and the more like you strike out into these increasingly dangerous places, the more homey and comfortable Vagrant's Rest becomes, and the more time you want to spend there. Not just because there's more vendors and more ways to upgrade your stuff and like more options and stuff, but because it feels safe and comfortable, and it's really warm. Like the rest of the world is this washed out gray, like awful place to be. But like Vagrant's Rest is like a lot of fires, and there's a woman that plays the lute, and like it's just this warm, like lovely, wholesome place to be.
It's kind of similar to Bastion. Have you played Bastion?
I haven't.
So Bastion's this really beautiful top-down kind of brawler, and it kind of has a similar thing where every time you go out and sort of like complete a level, you come back to the hub area called the Bastion, I think. And yeah, you get a sort of, each like level lets you build like a new building, but even like beyond that, every time you come back, there's usually like some more dialogue that you can have with the narrator, who's like the best part of the game. And there's like more, there'll sometimes be like more characters there, and there'll be like more stuff to do. And yeah, like, things like mechanical things like upgrades and actual stuff that you go and do because you want to improve your character. But then just stuff that's kind of, it's kind of like homey, kind of nice. You're
it's
just
very,
like, I don't want to go out there anymore. It's scary.
Yeah, exactly. And it does something that Dark Souls has never managed to as a franchise, which is make the hub area, whether it's like Firelink Shrine or whether it's like Majula, make them feel like a place that you want to spend time in.
Yeah, and I mean they try. Like Dark Souls 3 is such a, the Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3 has like so much to it. Like even,
but you don't want to. The thing is, you don't want to be there.
Well, I think another problem is that in Dark Souls 3, when you arrive in Firelink Shrine, everything is there. Like there's like 2 or 3 characters that you have to go out and actually find, but like you've got your blacksmith, you've got your random just general store, you've got your magic, which is magic's pretty easy to get.
You find the magic, the pyromancer, and the miscellaneous shop dude.
Yeah.
But
even the old lady is always there. She's like the weapon.
There's a bandit thief you can get later.
Right. Yeah.
But no, you're right. And then you can add. But then the thing that Dark Souls 3 does, you can add more depth to them by getting them tomes. They'll let them let you buy more items and shit.
Yeah, but it's like a purely mechanical thing.
It doesn't. There's no part of Firelink Shrine that I go to and I feel that I want. Like I don't feel at home there. It feels like a small corner of a dying world where everything's already happened, and you're taking up. Literally, Dark Souls 3 is about you like discarding like the idea of kings and stuff, and you literally start the game, your main place is a fucking X throne room.
Yeah,
like it's very symbolic, but it doesn't like I don't feel anything about Firelink Shrine.
I feel like one of the homiest places in the Dark Souls franchise is like the blacksmith in Dark Souls 1, the first one you sort of meet after Undead Burg, like that just like tower where it's like bonfire at the top, middle floor is just like empty or whatever, and the bottom floor is just the blacksmith. The blacksmith. Like that area is so, for me at least, it's so homey and comfy because it's just like any direction isn't particularly dangerous, but like you just got this little tower of, you can go see Onion Boy if you want.
It's a little bit of safety in a terrible world.
Yeah, and whereas when you got like a Dark Souls 3, they're just like they're very grandstandy about like here's your house. Welcome to Firelink Shrine. You're like, again? Like, Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 1 is like a fucking desolate place full of literally enemies. Like, technically, they're all bad guys.
I mean, spoiler alert. Firelink Shrine has enemies around it in Dark Souls 3. It's not like McNeill...
But the characters who inhabit Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3 are allies. Whereas you play Dark Souls 1 enough, and you walk around Firelink Shrine, you're like, I hate every single one of you.
And also, like, every time you walk past them, you're like, are you going to stand up and stab me?
Or it's just like, I hate all
no one in Dark Souls 3 feels...
Like, the first human you meet in Dark Souls 1 just laughs at you, and you're like, I don't like you, man.
Right, and I guess my point is that...
you're not technically evil, I don't like you.
There's a warmth and a quiet... Like, Dark Souls 3 is quiet, or the Dark Souls franchise in general is quiet in a way that's very confronting and depressing. Whereas Ashen is quiet in this way that is very like melodic. Like, sure, it's melancholy, and sure, it's like this. Everything is very dark, or whatever. But it has this stillness to it that the Souls franchise never quite got to. And I think maybe they didn't want to, or maybe it was just something they weren't interested in. But in comparison, because I've been playing a lot of Sekiro, and then I've been playing this for the research for this, and Sekiro is a very extreme example of It's like at the other end, as you were saying when we did our Sekiro episode, it's like you make those action games bend so far back they become Souls-like.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like the opposite direction where it's so quiet and very Journey-like. Like the game Journey reminds me a lot of Journey, but you bend it back enough that it almost becomes like an action game again.
Right.
It's kind of interesting, and there's more parallels about Journey we'll talk about later, but there's this sort of, there's no like pseudo-diegetic like, wow, when you do like a parry or whatever. It's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
that
it just,
noise.
the game just is there, and it just is ready for you. And the music, oh my God, the music in this game is beautiful. I sometimes, when I'm playing it, I will just fuck around for like 10 minutes walking from, like I could fast travel, but I don't want to because there is this, I don't know how they do it, but they make the music sound like it's the wind, but it's also music, but it's also like a piano, where it's like so like almost diegetic, and it's like almost in the game world, but it's almost not. Right. Where you're like, is this piano sound I'm hearing coming because of the wind going through that mountain?
It's like Zelda.
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
Breath of the Wild, where, especially in that game where you're walking through and you've got all this music that just like flows with the wind, and then you'll be walking along and you'll meet the bird guy who plays the accordion, which is actual diegetic music, but it flows in so well where you're like,
the soundtrack.
It flows in so well with the soundtrack that it makes the soundtrack feel more
like it's part of the world.
More like it's part of the world, yeah.
And that's such a special thing to do. And this game is like, honestly, like,
man, now I want to play Zelda some more.
Yeah, I just want to. I'm like, I want to play Breath of the Wild. But like, I don't know. This as a piece of media that like is by an independent studio and like has it's not a AAA game. It's very much a middle market game, which we're running out of pretty quickly. It is something very unique in that way, where it is very quiet. It's very like meditative, but not in that like vague Souls way. But I've played through the game and I've beaten it now. And
my God.
Yeah.
Is it not very long?
No, it's pretty long, but I've been playing it since like the start of the year.
Oh, right.
And what,
I haven't.
and it the vagueness in this game doesn't necessarily service the story in a way that's interesting. So in Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, all of the kind of Miyazaki games, one of his big things, it is Miyazaki, right? I always get that wrong.
Yes.
One of the things that he's interested in, and because he talks about it as being a kid, when you read difficult books, the thing it teaches you is to like persevere and work stuff out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the From Software games are about. It's about working it out for yourself. Here, his big quote is like, you have to like, the thing that makes games fun is the same thing that makes reading stuff fun when you're really young. You don't know any better, so your brain, you have to actually actively be a participant in working things out. This game has just enough to work out that I'm interested in the world, but not enough in the game that it feels like the vagueness is well served. So, for instance, when you work out that Cisna is going to be the big bad at the end, and you're like, oh, cool, like that's a really interesting twist because like, there's the Cisna's relative was helping you the whole time. But then it never goes anywhere because you kill Cisna and there's no second form, there's no revelation, you just do it. And that's it.
Right.
Like it doesn't, there's no, even if it was like, even those vague endings in those Souls games where in Dark Souls 2, you sit on the throne of one and you restart the cycle, or in Dark Souls 3, you light the flame or you don't. Or like those cycles that are interesting. There's no compelling hook here where you go, oh, that says something about the journey I was on. Like it just kind of ends and you're like, oh, I guess it's done.
Right.
And that brings me conveniently to my kind of central thesis, which is what I said about you playing as an NPC. And this is going to be for two reasons and in two ways. And you might be interested in this because it's kind of a wild mechanic. So one of the game's hidden mechanics that exist by default is that for their co-op, rather than being summoned into a world, you are an NPC in someone else's world.
Right.
But you don't transition. You just are in their world. So you still look like you play your game as normal.
Yeah.
But someone else in their game can be playing along with you and you can just be in their world as an NPC in that world.
Right.
But you look like one of the default like one of the 12 NPCs. You just become one of them, depending on who's supposed to spawn in that area. Okay. I'll try and explain it. So Derek Bradley, who was the creative director of the game, he says, it's kind of confusing, but when you play it, it's so natural that people don't even notice or care. And this rock, paper, shotgun article explained it really well. So I'm going to quote that article. Quote, but once you take up a quest, Jockle, who's one of the characters, accompanies you. And it's here that control seeds from programming to another player. Seamlessly. On the flip side, from that other player's perspective, they're still in control of their own protagonist while it's you controlling Jockle. You'll both think you're the hero when you're playing with each other. It's quite an interesting technology to get players to unknowingly roleplay.
Right.
So you see a character, you see one of the NPCs that's always bumming around with you, fuck off and do something else, and you follow them. You're like, what are they doing? Or the NPC is like, hey, we're going here, and they just start walking that way because it's another player knowing where they're going.
Right.
It's such an interesting idea. It's sneaky asymmetrical multiplayer. Like, I didn't know it was in the game until I read the article, and then I looked back at some of my recorded footage, and I was like, that's a dude.
Right.
I could tell. I was like, oh yeah, he was fucking around.
He
Or
was
I was
being a weirdo.
or I was like, oh, that guy was running to the objective because he knew where he was going.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Like, that's such a cool thing to sneak in.
It's kind of wild, yeah.
And it's on by default. Like, you have to turn it off actively, so you just don't notice. And you once play the hero and the supporting character. And more from the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article. Braley talks me through one early scene with Jockle where he asks you to help him find his brother's lockbox. Quote, the way we've written it means he's very engaged in wanting to find the lockbox. But at the same time, if I lead him, it's not character breaking. But if he leads me, it makes sense in the story, he says. It potentially means you could be teamed up with a Jockle who knows the path and will gladly lead the way, or in another run, he might not be sure at all, in which case you take the lead. Or no doubt for players on day one, it may just be the blind leading the blind. Quote, in that case, he is literally an NPC looking for his brother's lockbox, but he doesn't know he's an NPC. Bradley laughs. That's the magic. The same quest gets played out different in organic ways. That is a fucking crazy thing to put in your video game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They didn't talk about that at all before it came out. It was just in the game, and it was only afterwards.
I probably would have played it if I knew
What
this.
a cool... I would have been like, this is the coolest video game that I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
What a buck wild idea, though. Like, that to me, I'm like, okay, well, this isn't a fucking Souls clone. They were trying to do something else.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a weird Turing test because the default setting slots you into games seamlessly and the other way around. Ultimately, it's like an experiment to see if you can invest in NPCs that turn out to be real people.
Right.
Like, isn't that so weird?
That's kind of odd.
What a bizarre, like...
It's the reason, I mean, that's crazy because the reason that they probably wanted to keep that under wraps is because people would 100% just pervert this.
Well, fuck around, man.
Yeah, people would just ruin it. So you gotta hide the fact. It's almost like how Journey, in that, and again, yeah, I can see why you're pulling parallels to Journey, where I guess in that game, the reason why it works is because there's so little interaction and there's so little that you can.
Did you want to explain the co-op in Journey, just the top level?
So Journey's just like I guess like it's one of the OG walking sims.
Yeah, it's a walking simulator.
Yeah,
but other people can kind of transition into.
Yeah,
it.
and you're this like nameless, faceless character who can only like run around and jump, and you just kind of move through these environments. It's really pretty and stuff. And yeah, they do like seamless multiplayer where they'll kind of make players sort of like meet, and then you'll sort of move through the world like together. But like there's no like co-op. Because everything
you just kind of exists in the world.
Yeah, everything can be done solo. So you just kind of move through with someone, and then
you part ways.
Then you part ways, and you'll meet someone else. And yeah, that's literally just like that's the game.
But the cool thing about this one is like
it's just
they didn't tell anyone.
But
the other thing is that the only reason it works in this game versus other games, like if you did this in Dark Souls, the thing that would trip you up is that someone will bust out a spell and you go, wait, that NPC is not a pyromancer.
Right.
But the thing about this game is there's such limited options. There is like, and one of my favorite things about it is there's no swords.
Right.
It's just because, and the reason is like humans didn't advance that far in civilization before the ash fell.
Yeah.
So they don't have swords. They just have axes and shit before this magic stuff happened.
Clubs
just cool
stuff.
and like interesting and like cool.
Yeah.
But there's no like magic. It's like you can heal with they're like Estus Spots. You can heal with this like gourd thing that you have.
Gourd!
And you can gourd, just like Sekiro. And that's like, you can throw, any character can throw spears. NPCs can throw spears.
Right.
You can throw spears, stab with, like hit with a weapon, like, or use a shield.
Club. Right.
That's kind of it. So when an NPC, and I'm just thinking about it now, like through my play experience, it didn't register as weird when Jockle took out a two-handed weapon instead of a one-handed.
Right.
But even though like he'd always use it to like, the one-handed before, that's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Like your brain doesn't go, wait, he can't do that because there's not enough options for that to be an issue. So it's just like, which makes me think that it was such a deliberate choice to try that idea.
Yeah. And then they just put a game around it. Which I always wonder, like that, building a game that way sometimes works really well, but sometimes doesn't. Yeah. And I think they clearly, given like the narrative kind of just ending and stuff, it almost seems like they had this cool idea and they were just like, well, let's just build like the bare minimum to kind of make this idea work. and then just flesh it out with some general
Yeah.
kind of interesting stuff here and there, make it look good, sell it as a Souls-like, it'll make money.
Yeah, and I think one of the normally when we talk about games like this, my biggest thing is like it had a lot of potential, and they could have like if they invested in the writing and the narrative, I think it could have really become something. And normally I have like a monologue at the end where like I try and tie it all together to like make something meaningful of the fact that it didn't kind of go anywhere, and that sometimes that's fine. You can just do a thing for the sake of doing it and whatever. But I wonder if an idea like this requires people not knowing it exists to prove that it works. But at the same time,
but as soon as you acknowledge the existence of it, it kind of the magic kind of fizzles out. Like it's like a narrative twist that's like built into the mechanics. And while like as a media consuming society, we've developed kind of like techniques and like social rules around like spoiling narratives, the idea is just like, oh, don't spoil me, I haven't seen the film, or this, that, and the other. Whereas like with games or like with mechanical ideas, there isn't like that same level of I guess like respect, I guess.
I would
like for some games there are, but it's always the really wiggy out there where people would just say, look at nothing and play this game.
There's like people are pretty good with our Sekiro playthrough about telling me just enough to be like, okay, go this way.
Yeah,
but they're not telling me like, oh, you need to like go this place to unlock this new skill tree. They're just like, hey, heads up, like.
But it's like, if you're talking about like Game of Thrones, if someone was just like, oh, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, what's it like? Someone would be like, oh, it's this really cool fantasy thing. It's really cool, interesting, really cool, and
you can describe it without ruining.
You can describe it, and it's like, even though it's like so spoiler heavy, like there's still ways to describe it. Whereas like, if someone was just like, oh, what's Pony Island like? I would be like, read nothing and just go play it.
Go play it.
Because it's like mechanically, it's hard to describe. When you talk about games, everyone's just like, oh, most people
you did that with the French dude, the French Tarantino. What's his name again?
Quentin Dupieux.
You did that with his one about the tire.
Right, and then also like, the one don't look at anything,
and also the one about the
wrong.
Wrong. You just said don't watch, just watch the thing.
Yeah, because there's no way to describe those films
without ruining without
kind of ruining what it's interesting.
And is that the? I mean, because I imagine.
Well, I almost feel like Ashen is actually succeeding in this regard, because if you were to describe Ashen to someone, you would say it's a Souls-like. It's just like a pretty interesting Souls-like, and it would give them an idea of, oh, that's a game that I might like, twist. But it doesn't tell you, it doesn't give away a mechanical. It may, narrative twists, and like the ending of Dark Souls 2, like that's a bit of, you're like, what the fuck? But like you can explain Dark Souls 2 without giving away the narrative twist. But like this game manages to, and I mean, part of it is because they probably didn't tell anyone, because the media would just fucking spoil it for everything if they did. Because cool mechanics become bullet points, whereas like cool storylines are just shrouded, because people have this idea of just like, oh, don't spoil the storyline. Right. It's like, maybe don't spoil the game mechanics.
Here's the problem though.
Like I wish I had played Titanfall 2 organically without realizing how much of a buck wild time it was. I still had a good time.
I won't spoil it, but the minute you know about the central conceit of that story.
Of what, Titanfall 2 or
yeah,
Ashen?
Titanfall 2.
Right.
You're like, dude, they put that in a shooter? Like, it's cool. Like, the twist they put in, you're like, oh, they did that. And they do it well, and like, it's cool. But I've been thinking about this a lot, because I've been working with, I've been thinking about this a lot when I'm talking to Solo from Horror Show about some of the stuff we've been doing. And one of the things that we discussed is that when they put out a record, so I think it goes for music as well, when they put out a record, tends to be there's a central theme that he's writing about that has come up in his life at that point. Subconsciously, they write a record over 2 years, and it happens to be about, previous one was about like death and transition.
Oy.
The new one is about something else that we won't talk about, but because it's sort of, it's NDA and stuff like that. But tends to be that stuff is like a central theme, right? And what tends to happen is if you tell someone it's about that, that's all they see. Like, they can't see the forest for the trees. They're like, oh, like Bardo State. Like, if you listen to the record Bardo State by Horror Show, and you know what the Bardo Todol is, and you know that Nick wrote that album, and it ended up being about his struggles with, like, trying to be in the world and trying to find a way to do that in a way that feels, like, organic, and a way that feels like you can be happy or, like, exist without being miserable. And then the implications of death upon that. Like, if someone told you that going in, I don't know. You don't get the joy of discovering that yourself. You don't get the you don't get the interesting like moments where
Right.
or if you watched like an explainer video about a song before you listen to it, right? Before you listen to it,
Yeah.
So like there's a line in Astray where it's like I can hear the sirens calling, and it's a double meaning. It's supposed to be like sirens like the police sirens, but sirens like seductress like sirens or whatever. I wrote a whole video about it, put it out, have been talking to Nick about that song for 2.5 years now. And the other morning on the phone, I was like, oh, it's sirens like seductresses. And he was like, yeah. I'm like, I didn't realize that was a double meaning. Like I went that long, it didn't click. And that's a cool realization to have, because no one said, well, the album is about these things. Like if they said it was about the parallels
about old pirate mythology.
Yeah, or the album's about like trying to not give in to like stuff. That
okay, right.
That away. Like there's a thematic thing about that. But like I don't know, there's something interesting in that. It is harder with game mechanics. Like the first time you play, the closest analogy I have is Demon's Souls when it came out. The first time you like when you die and you respawn and you go to like the dream, whatever the dream's called, you're like, what the fuck? Or the Nexus, I think it's called. You're like, what the fuck? And this person's like, yeah, dude, you're gonna keep dying and coming back. And you're like, what? Like it's like you're like, what? Like that's the twist, right?
Yeah.
That's a cool twist to have in a game. It's like Dark Souls 3 when you first pop an ember.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, what the fuck? That's dope. And it's those mechanics and those twists, or when it was like when we were playing Sekiro and there was a boss that I killed second try. She fucking came back.
We're all like, oh god, 2 health bars.
And it was a cool, fun twist. But if someone had said every boss in Sekiro dies twice, it would have ruined that for me. I don't know if that's still true or not, but like, you're right. There is something very different about mechanics where in the way that we describe video games from a marketing perspective, it doesn't necessarily do those games justice in the sense of like, the things that make them interesting are those those organic realizations.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if there's a solution for that, but it is something that like that is kind of crazy. But that kind of conveniently brings me to the thing I wanted to kind of finish up on and wrap up with, which is it's been 10 years since Demon's Souls came out.
Whoa. Wow.
Which seems like it's been way longer given how far those games have come. And those games are about cycles and endings, and Ashen's about cycles and endings, and all of those all of those Corpse Run,
I love it.
Corpse Run Soulsborne games are all about like the cycles and death and coming back. And Ashen is really hard. Like it's a hard game. Like it's as difficult as Dark Souls 1 probably. It's very esoteric and very weird. And I don't know. It's no coincidence in a game that is that hard. Those ideas of like vagueness, light and darkness. Dark Souls is a lot about like the first flame and fire and darkness and that kind of thing. It's a big theme in Ashen as well. It's like light and dark and ash and like obscuring the light and things like that. And like inner darkness and things like that. And you can beat this game and play it again and get something different from it. Same with like a lot of those kind of games, but. It's weird that in a game which is, especially in a type of genre, which is very much about suffering and struggling and like really like overcoming obstacles, like just through like sheer will and willingness to unpack and work things out. And like we talked about with Sekiro, like there was a moment where it clicked, like, and you saw that when I was playing and I was like, oh, now I get it. But you have those moments over and over again as you play where you start to understand more and more of it. But Ashen, I didn't really have that. I didn't really have a moment where I was like, oh, I get it. I just picked it up because I played Dark Souls 1. And I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing that was interesting is, as much as I had that, it didn't take away from like the wonder and the joy that I had, because it was a bit like, playing Ashen is a bit like how I remember what Dark Souls 1 felt like. If I go back and play Dark Souls 1 on my Switch now, which I do very frequently, it feels like playing an old game.
Yeah.
Playing Ashen feels like what I remember Dark Souls being like.
Right. Yeah.
And for a game that's for a game in a genre that's about like memories and echoes and like time becoming really soft and like the past coming back and the future kind of being this immutable thing, it's really cool that like not just that the game can make me feel that, but that I think the game is that. It's saying, hey, remember like how whenever you summon someone in Dark Souls, when you summoned, whether it was another player or an NPC, that you felt this great relief that you had someone in your corner to back you up. The game has that, and the NPCs are that, but sometimes it's someone in control, like another player. Yeah. And it adds a level of intrigue and kind of an investment that you have in those NPCs. You go, oh my god, Jockel's really on his shit today, like he's really helping me out. There's something very earnest about that I love. Like it's very, I don't know, like that combined with the Vagrant's Rest, where it's this homey place. it's a game that, as much as it takes place in this depressing world, I find it really like heartwarming that a studio put that much faith in people's ability to connect with each other unwillingly.
Yeah.
And people's ability to invest in stories and characters. And because you invest in those NPCs, you help Jockle like go through and like find out the mystery of like where his brother died and like what's happened to his family. And at the end, he's like, I couldn't have done this without you. And you've seen him grow and progress. And if you're lucky enough to get another player character who's really good, he's like a great help in boss fights. And you always have the thing about Ashen is there's always someone with you. There's always a companion. And there's something very earnest and lovely about that I don't know. I think it's very easy to look at something like Sekiro and be like, it's weeby Japanese shit. And it is, right?
It's absolutely that.
But to play something like Ashen where it's just like this earnest kind of thing that's looking at, well, how do we connect to each other? And what does that mean in a video game setting? Can we connect without talking, just by like the shared goal of like doing a thing and not realize the whole time that we were connecting with both a person and a character? That's such a unique thing to do. And I don't know. I think games like this are so important and we need that middle market. I think this is a good example of like, we should like play these games, play Metro Exodus, play this, like play these games that are doing something that is different to AAA, because I fucking love it. And like, I respect the hell out of them for making this. And I respect the hell out of like the publishing wing for being like, yeah, this is a risk we're willing to take. And that's really cool. So I don't know, I guess that's kind of where I want to end my thoughts. I really like this game. It's not amazing. I'm not going to like put my David Doxel stamp on it, or I'm like, this is part of that legacy, but it does something different and it does it in a way that is fucking earnest. And that deserves a fucking award. Yeah. Because the world's a weird place right now and we need more stuff that believes in people. So I'm totally behind this, and I really appreciate what they were doing. Do you have any recommendations for this week?
Crap. King Gizzard is releasing more music slowly.
Have you been getting through the new stuff?
The new stuff?
As it trickles in?
Yeah. They're sort of doing like one song like every couple weeks, it seems. Seems like they're gearing up for a new album.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan of it yet, but
we'll see.
I'll listen to their old stuff a lot.
Yeah.
And then just more Evangelion. We're slowly making our way through that anime garbage.
Still.
That's it. That's all I do.
I want to shout out James Allen McCune put out his first video on a series he's been working on, which is sort of like I would describe it as like a Shane Dawson type documentary series.
Is that 1 hour video you linked me that I haven't watched?
I would describe it as like a Shane Dawson type thing, except that
a bunch of YouTubers.
It doesn't have any of the, I don't know, it's all of the people that I normally watch on YouTube, but it doesn't have any of that like,
I'm very important.
Shane Dawson is a very important dude in YouTube, and he over dramatizes everything.
Like Shane Dawson.
James Allen McCune, his whole point at the end of that video, and he looks at the guy who used to run Sword and Scale, which is the true crime podcast, and his whole point at the end of it, which I love, it's very in line with what we do, is that discourse is important, and you should talk about stuff instead of just making snap decisions.
Right.
And I fucking love that. And like, I love James Allen McCune. I love the people in it. It's got Gus Johnson. It's got Eddie Burback. It's got my boys from Sugar Pine, Kib, Steve, James DeAngelis.
I've been meaning to watch it.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I sat on the couch and watched the whole thing in one sitting with a beer last night. It's fabulous. I really love it. So I'll link that in the show notes. I really recommend it. Otherwise, I kind of haven't been doing a lot of media except Ashen, because I was trying to finish it before this podcast.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend Sekiro, and I recommend our Sekiro playthrough on the Colby House channel.
Just get that plug right in.
Get that plug right in there. Check it out. It's been good fun. Well, because I was going to recommend the game, but honestly, I can just recommend you watching us play the game. Otherwise, where can people find us?
Facebook.
At DCMworks Social.
YouTube.
YouTube.com/DCMworks.
Twitter.
At DCM_works.
Patreon.
Patreon.com/DCMworks. Our tiers start at $3 a month. You can subscribe to us there and get access to all of our content. And then at $6 a month, which is our next tier up, you get a bunch of cool bonus stuff and some extra behind the scenes. You also get access to our post show, which you can only see if you're watching live or if you're a Patreon. Extra 20 minutes of these handsome boys.
Oh God, I can't imagine it.
Doing it right now because you're ready for bed, or like you can't imagine how good value that is.
I can't imagine watching 20 minutes more of this as a viewer.
You know, the thing you're supposed to do is like promote the thing people pay for.
No, you
sorry, I was doing. You provide the balance.
I'm the guy on the other side of the
you're
table.
You're the
I'm the devil's advocate.
You're the Ned in the Spider-Man situation. You're the guy in the chair. Absolutely. Check that out. Otherwise, you get access to over 60 plus episodes of behind the scenes content, as well as all kinds of different projects. And you get a discount on my book, which you can buy at mainoutrig.com. It's this boy here.
That looks like a book to me.
It's a book. It's my book. I've written a bunch of terrible ones. This is the first good one. You can buy it at mainoutrig.com, and if you use code AFAPod, you get 15% off the digital download. Otherwise, it's sold everywhere online where you would normally buy books, Amazon, iTunes, all those places. The audiobook is coming out soon. Pat and I just have to finish the editing and then get the reshoots done, so keep an eye out for that as well.
Reshoots.
And then book 2 hopefully in a few months as well, so it's exciting.
Oh my god.
Just keep an eye out for that. Otherwise,
Book numero dos.
Book numero dos. I'm really excited about it. It's really different and really fun, so I'm very excited. Otherwise, if you want to follow us individually, I'm at DCM I Hate Pie.
I'm at Literal Citrus.
We will see you guys next week.